Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is another episode of The Singers, this time featuring legendary, iconic member of the Stampeders, founding member, Kim Berley. Welcome back to the show, Kim.
Thank you, Tommy.
It is absolutely my pleasure to have you here. So last time we spoke on this show was remembering Mel Shaw, and before that we talked about your career with the Stampeders and beyond that initial run with that band, and sort of about how you got into playing drums. This time, what I want to know is, what inspired you to start singing?
Well, I had my older brother. He was 6 years older than me, and he was the family singer, right? And so I always wanted to sing. But whenever my older brother sang, and he had a very pristine voice, right? A very clear, clean voice. And whenever he would sing, my mother would get all goo-goo-eyed. And I would think, well, God, I don't want to have to compete with that. I'll have to come up with something else to get my mother's attention. So I've always had this desire to sing. And I remember as a kid sitting up above a stairwell with a friend of mine, I was maybe 7 or 8, and singing a Fair & Young song, Young Love, singing it for my friend. And I didn't realize it, but his mother was sitting down having her coffee in a chair in the living room. And after I was finished, she said, "My, you have a lovely voice, Kim." And I was pretty much, at the time, you were embarrassed because you didn't want anybody else listening in. But yeah, and I've always, I would sing under my breath. And when the band got going, I had to sing something. But I was drumming. And this was before, sound systems in general were really terrible in the early 60s, because it was the early 60s. It was 63 when I really got, I got my drums in the summer of 63, and by November I was in a band. And probably by the next April I had a song or so in the set, and somebody would have to come over, like my big brother who was the singer in the band. He would come over and hold the microphone in front of my mouth while I sang, and I think I sang the old Everly Brothers tune, "Gone, Gone, Gone," some sunny day, baby, when everything seems okay, baby, you wake up and find that you're alone, and all that. So I really liked it, and I got to sing that, but I didn't sing very well because I really didn't know anything about singing other than it felt good to do. And so, my pitch was sketchy. And you would, of course, try and sound like whoever it was that you were, the song you were singing. You'd subconsciously imagine in your own mind that you would be hearing that voice while your own voice was doing its best to imitate it. So that was my singing start, and that's continued with the Stampeders. I would always have 2 or 3 songs a night that somebody would come over and give me a microphone or hold it there so I could drum and sing. It was the highlight of my night. I loved singing. And then when the band got going, Richard liked my voice, I guess, because we recorded "Carry Me." And much to my surprise, he said, "Well, will you sing the lead on it? And I'll sing the harmony." And I was very pleasantly surprised. So the very first song that we had out that was successful, I was singing on. And that kind of got it going. Then I was, I would sing. I started to write my own songs so I could, because the way it went in the early days, with the exception of Richard, who had me sing a number of his songs, like "Wild Eyes" was his, I sang that. And then there were a lot of album cuts, songs he would write that he had me sing the lead vocal on. And I learned to sing by singing. I found my own voice by being able to do an original song, which you have to create and sing with your own voice, because you don't automatically slip into the point of reference of doing a cover.
Well, there's
like
several.
If you want to cover an Elton John song, you automatically have that voice in your head. So it's difficult to break free of that.
Right. Well, there's several key points that you mentioned there. One, being influenced by the likes of Fair & Young and the Everly Brothers.
Yeah.
That was the golden age for vocal groups, really. The other thing, now don't tell Ronnie King this, but "Carry Me" and "Wild Eyes" are hands down my 2 favorite Stampeders songs. So
well, there you go.
That and
must be the voice. Huh?
Yeah, and you mentioned finding your own voice, and writing. And that's something that is so key and important to being a good, successful singer, I think, is because when I write a song, as I'm sure you can relate, we are working in our wheelhouse. So you're not stretching from, for example, if you were a baritone, you wouldn't be stretching to a tenor range, right? You're working within your wheelhouse. So that's really important. Now, over the years, you've sung many, many songs with the Stampeders, and you've been, obviously that's worked out well for you. And then for a while when the Stampeders split up, you went on and got your own record deal and did some other stuff. Now, I can't remember if you were singing on that project or not.
Yeah, I was the front man. That was the cry. And yeah, I had another drummer. I sang the whole night. I was down front for the whole thing, which was, I really enjoyed that too. I'd always, as drummers, some drummers really like being back there. And I was not one of them. I wanted to be in the front. As a matter of fact, in the very early gigs of the band, instead of setting up behind the guitar line sort of thing, which was the standard thing to do, I would set up on the end and defy anybody to move me. Here I was at one end, so because I wanted to be seen, I wanted to be down front. I've always enjoyed performance and enjoyed being seen. So I didn't like the behind the band spot, unless I could be like Ringo, who he had like a 4-foot drum riser, so he was well above everybody. Yeah. We tried to do that once. We built a 4-foot drum riser put it on steel posts that screwed into flanges on the bottom, and it was a fold-out piece of plywood, and it would just shake back and forth. It would sway about 6 or 8 inches, and it was horrible. So it lasted a few gigs. But
I had a drummer years ago around that, circa 1980, 81, with this 3-piece that we called the No Name Band. And the drummer was just he was an odd fella, is all I can say. And his business acumen was horrible. And we played 2 gigs. One was at a high school and the other was at this after-hours club, neither of which we made any money on. And the after-hours club thing, I saw him putting up posters on the main street in North Bay half an hour before we were supposed to set up and start to play. And so we knew we weren't going to make any money. And one of the things he did was he built himself a riser with banquet tables. So you can imagine how that went. And he was a hard hitter on the drums. So all of a sudden we're playing, I don't know what it was, a Santana song or whatever. And all of a sudden we can hear, help me, help me. And my bass player and I looked at each other and went, nope. We weren't making any money and we weren't happy. And he could just, so his dad, I guess, came to his rescue. His dad was there. But yeah, the whole riser thing and being up front, it's interesting too. There had to be somewhat of a feeling of freedom to get out from behind the kit, though. Because I know that it takes a lot of coordination to play drums in the first place. You've got different brain signals going in different ways. Your mind is doing so many different things. And then to sing on top of that, wow. And we'll be right back after this.
Yeah, it requires, you really have to want to do it, and then you find a way, because you're quite right. Initially, if you put your focus on what you're singing, then you're liable to slow down and speed up. And if you're focused entirely on the drumming, well, then, your voice is, which needs attention, especially when you're young, especially when you're just kind of learning the gig. So, I'm sure I was terrible in both drumming and singing for quite some time, but I wanted it enough to persist. And I took a fair bit of abuse from the other guys in the band at certain periods.
Well, it's like I say, you got to be an acrobat to play drums and sing well at the same time.
Yeah. So now, there are a few drummers who sing. It's not widely done, but neither is it unique anymore. Yeah, Ringo sang a couple of songs from the drums. If you've ever seen an early Beatles show video or anything, he did a song called Boys or something. Anyway, that was the first thing I ever heard him do. And back up there, up on the drums.
And who could forget what came later from Ringo in Yellow Submarine? But he was a lot more experienced than you when you were first starting out with the Stampeders. He was already well into the business.
That's right. Yeah. The Rory Storm or something. Yeah, he was a pro. Yeah.
So you had a lot to put on your shoulders. And by the time I saw the Stampeders, you were very proficient at it. So kudos to you for persevering and getting it done. Now, is there anything that you do to look after your voice or anything that you don't do?
I sing pretty much every day. And there was a period of time when, I would kind of sing under my breath, which is not a good practice. If you're going to sing and you want to keep your voice in control, then you've got to use it fully. because that's what singing is. I mean, it's just like, in a sense, I suppose, blowing a wind instrument, the pressure of your breath and the way that you constrict your throat, I guess, is what creates notes. So you really need to use it. And so I've been, I've always sung a lot. I sing when I'm around the house, and I sing when I'm working and whatever, if I'm working at some project I'm doing. And these days, well, I just come down. I've got my studio down here overlooking the valley, and I pick up my guitar and sing. And I always sing. I sing full voice. I don't sing under my breath. And I think that's what you need to do.
Well, yeah, I think that's important to keep exercising that muscle. I do a lot of different things. Like I have asthma, so I stopped drinking milk years ago because it builds the phlegm.
Sure.
And I avoid certain foods and try to make sure that I get a good night's sleep,
Mm-hmm.
And I find that, and there's some singers that I know and have spoken to who do all sorts of things, like they use a mister, like a humidifier, at night. And I find that for me, the best way to keep myself lubricated is to just make sure you have enough water through the week before the gig.
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff. But the other thing that I think is true, and this is, I guess it's different strokes for different folks, but don't treat it too preciously, And I look at Ronnie, who's, just done all the rock and roll you can imagine. And he can still step up to a microphone and belt out a song with a good, strong voice. And he doesn't sing around the house, I'll guarantee you. And so it's just, that's part of it too. And you look at Paul McCartney, who's, smoked most of his life and gets up and sings at 70 or 80 years old. He can sing for 2 or 3 hours. It's just, I think sometimes if you get too precious about anything, you wreck it. Or you're sick all the time, or you're always worried about your vocal cords, or whether you've got a cold or whatever. I mean, we've all sung through all kinds of conditions and ailments. And in the cry, I mean, I blew my voice out doing that, but that was mainly because I had really poor monitoring. And the only way I could kind of get hold of what I was singing, because I couldn't really hear it. So I felt the tension in my throat, which is, if you're tensing up when you're singing, that's going to cost you. And so I learned the hard way that I had to invest in better monitors.
Well, that's another thing, that happens is I took voice lessons way back when because I had a problem when I first went out on the road doing 6 nights a week. And one of the things that my voice coach told me was not to do any heavy lifting, which is, as you know, in the band, it's pretty hard to do. But I studied martial arts for most of my life. And one thing I didn't do a whole lot of, I do some weightlifting, but not too much, because I find that really stiffens up your neck.
I would think so. That sounds reasonable to me, yeah.
And do you know about, I'm sure you know Thor, the John Michael Thor. It was Thor and the Imps, and he...
Oh, yeah.
I
do, yeah.
Keep the Dogs Away, I think, was his first big break. So I saw his show a few times, and I mean, the guy was like Mr. Canada or something like that. He was like huge bodybuilder guy, but his singing was just, there was no vocal range to speak of.
Yeah.
It's just, he's kind of just barking into the microphone, and I guess it fit with the role. But yeah, I guess the point is, don't work out too much, and like you're saying, don't be too timid with it. I think that comes down to confidence.
Yeah. You do martial arts. When I was younger, I did not have any exercise regime at all. I've just always been active, and I guess I lived at a very high metabolism, so I never really gained a lot of weight or anything like that. But those things don't seem to affect singing as much as I can see, though. If you're lifting weights, you're straining and you're tensing almost every muscle, or really literally every muscle in your body, including your larynx and everything. And yeah, so I can see where doing something like that would be tough on the voice. Now, you can also, I've learned, I can get rough voiced and without tensing, without causing any strain on my voice. If I want to garble a note, that doesn't hurt. In the early days, you create that by creating a lot of tension in your voice, in your throat. So you don't have to do that, though. You can make those sounds even without tension.
Well, it's interesting because for a while I did a solo acoustic act, and I was covering songs like Maggie May by Rod Stewart and It's a Heartache by Bonnie Tyler. And these are songs that are not only raspy, but they're in the higher vocal range as well.
Yeah.
And the trick for me to hit those notes and have that raspiness was just to relax my throat completely and just relax my body completely. So I think what you're relating to there is that you're just comfortable and relaxed when you put the growl in. It's not something you're straining for. It's just a matter of relaxing and letting the air flow.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there is a thing that happens, though, if you're out and you're singing every night on the road. So you're singing out and you're, and you're busy. Touring is quite, well, you're always working. It's not like you're just working on stage. You're traveling, you're driving, you're flying, whatever you're doing, it's like a 24-hour-a-day job. So there's a huskiness that happens. And I think your vocal cords swell a little bit or something. And it's nice, they call it like a smoky voice, which I suppose smoking will do it too. I had a brief flirtation with cigarettes when I was in my 30s.
Let's just get this straight, kids. Don't smoke. Smoking is bad. Okay.
Unless you want a smoky voice.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. And we'll be right back after this. Oh, boy. So, speaking of, listen, kids, if I was, say...
the kids aren't listening to us. We're too old, man.
if I was a young person just starting to sing, would you have any advice or tips for me as a budding singer?
Well, I've never been trained. I never took music lessons of any kind. And that's not a point of pride with me, If I had my druthers, I would have had a nice musical education, I think. But I mean, number one, I was intimidated by musical theory when I was younger. And I thought if I went to a teacher, they would tell me, you just don't have what it takes, so go do something else. That's basically what I felt. So I never took drum lessons. I never took vocal lessons, but I was interested. And I would, I watched and I listened and I would read what I could by, anything that people I admired, or maybe you didn't even hear about, but who were interesting. I would pay attention to what they had to say and experiment with things in my own way. Now, I think it's a very interesting thing, the idea of musical training, both as a vocalist and an instrumentalist. The teacher is a very important person in your life. And some teachers will train you in the art of finding notes and of opening your throat, but not necessarily singing, because singing, the essence of it is communication. And so you can hit your notes, but if you don't have the heart of a song, then you're not singing it. You're singing notes. So as far as training goes, do what you feel. If you feel like a teacher is, if you're young and you're taking some musical training and you really like the teacher and you feel like you're making progress, well, then obviously stay with that until you don't, Yeah, I guess it's like learning anything else. You find out what your passion is, and your intuition will tell you what your best next move is.
Well, I think that's a good point when you mention passion, because I have seen singers. Well, for example, I went to see Yes on their Union tour. I think it was around 93, 94 in Toronto. And John Anderson is a phenomenal singer. No doubt about it. I mean, just let either one of us try and sing Roundabout right now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that to make it even worse, they were on a slow rotating stage. I've never been more bored at a concert in my life because they just stand there. So I think a key element is what I know that you and the other guys in the Stampeders bring to it, is that you're not just singers. You have the passion for it, and it shows. Even when you're behind the kit, you can see it in your face, and your expressions when you're singing Wild Eyes and etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big part of it, is you have to actually be alive up there.
Oh, wow, without question. And it's also, a lot of people were singing for their own pleasure and everything, in which case, if they didn't have a passion for it, they probably wouldn't even do it. But you got to remember, if you're up on a stage, you are a performer, no matter what else you are. You may be a singer, a musician, a lecturer, whatever you're doing. If you're standing there in front of a bunch of people, you are performing. And you got to keep that in mind, And also, from a musician's point of view, a singer's point of view, performance will soften a lot of soft spots. The ability to communicate with people and give them something to watch. You sound better when you look good, from an audience point of view, without question.
That's funny you bring that up, because the show that I played a few weeks back in London, I stopped for a second to retune my guitar, and the drummer wasn't paying absolute attention. He was about to start counting in the next song. The bass player said, "No, wait, Let him tune. He sounds better when he's in tune. You know, and I think it kind of corresponds with every aspect of the music. You know, you have to do your homework. You have to be polished and ready. And I see it in you guys. You know, you all have that professionalism. In fact, one time I put a video up on YouTube and Ronnie King commented, geez, you could have shaved. you know.
Yeah, well, that's Ronnie poking you in the ribs. Because actually, that generally doesn't make a lot of difference, especially with rock and roll. My God, booglier, you know, the rougher you can look, sometimes the better it is. But it depends, you know, what's your image? What are you trying to project? What does your audience expect of you? All of that stuff comes into play. So yeah, it's a complete package. When you walk out on the stage, you got to be more than, you know, if you're a side man, you can stand in the back and play and nobody's looking at you. It doesn't matter what. You don't have to so much as smile. You can just focus on your playing and do that. But I find most musicians enjoy the performance aspect of it. And so, you know, we lean into it.
Well, yeah, outside the performance aspect of the music, the rest is work, right? So speaking of work, I know that you guys as a band have slowed down. And I think, weren't they introducing you guys on your last tour as you loved them in the 70s? Now here they are in their 70s.
Yes.
So what's coming up for the Stampeders?
Well, we tour now. We do the whole country it's going to be about every couple of years, but we break it up into, you know, Ontario is the most populous part of the country. So we can work, you know, I suppose we can work 30 dates in Ontario. And then the Maritimes, the Prairies and British Columbia, we do them in segments. So one year we did the Prairies, Manitoba, Saskatchewan and Alberta this spring, like from mid-April to mid-May. And so you're on the road, it's pretty much a driving tour. And we'll work 3 nights, sometimes 4. 4 nights is about our limit, like back to back. Because, you know, being in our mid-70s, you drive 2 or 3 hours and do a sound check and get a nap, bite to eat and get a nap, and then go back out. And we probably do about 100 minutes or so on stage. And so we can do 4 nights of that. And if there's a long distance to travel, we always take a day for that. Otherwise, it becomes just too crazy. In the younger days, it didn't matter. You could drive 7 hours and show up and play and stay up and party all night and do it again the next day. That's not happening.
Well, I was just thinking, you know,
thankfully, that's not happening anymore.
I was just thinking it must be nice to have 3 singers in the band, because when you mentioned you guys do about 100 minutes, when I do a 90-minute show, it's a lot of work for just me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But,
it absolutely is. So, yes, it is nice to have. I mean, we're, you know, probably all singing in almost every song, but it's not necessarily the lead. You know, if there are backgrounds, there are harmonies and all that. So we're singing a lot, but nobody's carrying the load of lead vocalist for the entire set. And so, yeah, that is good.
Well, you're definitely one of the best vocal groups to come out of Canada. And, you know, once again, congratulations on a long and illustrious career. And I want to thank you so much, Kim, for once again taking the time out of your day to do this with me. Give my best to Richie and Ronnie and everybody. And until next time, cheers.
Well, cheers back at you, Tommy.
It is absolutely a pleasure every time I have the opportunity to speak with Kim Berley, or any of the members of the Stampeders for that matter. Now here, for your listening pleasure, is one of my all-time favorite Stampeders songs featuring Kim Berley on lead vocals, Wild Eyes. Enjoy.
Wild eyes, I can't look away from your wild eyes.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. And hey, here's some news. We've just recently joined forces with 519 Magazine, so you can check out my interviews there as well. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.